Good evening and a very warm welcome to our program iMed medical program right here on Channel I. We're very keen about your health and we're about to touch on a topic which is quite timely, I suppose, with the current situation of the country. And now keeping up with your mental health can be very tricky given the current situation, as I mentioned, and therefore we here at iMed decided to host a couple of programs to focus on a particularly targeted group, and the targeted group which you might wonder, which is about children. So we're going to focus on the mental health issues and related issues in the mental health sector of children today. And to do the honors, we do have with us Dr. Dulangi Dahanayaka. She is a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist at the Lady Ridgeway Hospital in Colombo. So a very warm welcome to you and welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you, Sonal.
And yes, now let me ask you the first question, Doctor. If you could explain to the layman out there in general, what are child mental health and related issues?
Yeah, so when we think of a child, we mainly focus on their physical health. That's how we traditionally that's where we traditionally tend to focus on. But mental health is also increasingly recognized as extremely important for children. And when we think of their mental health, it's just more than the absence of any problems or disorders. It's also about enhancing their mental well-being. So by mental well-being, what is meant is that we help them to achieve their full potential in life, and they are able to handle the normal everyday stressors without a lot of distress. And they feel content and they can contribute to society in a fruitful manner. So basically they are able to function in their roles, they are happy and they are doing the best that they can. So that's where we try to get our kids towards, without it's not, like I mentioned, it's not just the absence of disease.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that they are also thriving and happy and content.
I think that's very important when it comes to caring about a child's health. It's not only physical, it's not only emotional, it's both, right? So Doctor, since you're in the field of consultant child and adolescents, if you could explain to our viewers out there the common types of psychiatric disorders that you come across when you get cases of children.
Yeah, so I think one of the commonest ones is, of course, we see a lot of developmental disorders where children come with difficulties in their social interactions, their their interactions with their peers, and then that's where we consider a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And then we also have children coming in with issues in their learning, so they may have trouble with academic performance. So we see those children with academic and other related developmental issues. And then there are also kids who come with a lot of emotional problems. I think there's a lot of children nowadays coming with school refusal. We struggle to manage that in the current context because it's difficult to hold schools regularly, and for the past 2.5 years or so there hasn't been regular input from schools for the children, for the majority of kids. So we do see a lot of kids coming with these emotional issues related to school refusal, and again other issues like depression, because even children as young as 10 years may develop depressive episodes. And then another common emotional presentation is with a lot of fears and anxieties. So we see children coming with who are scared of the dark, who are scared of dogs, so all sorts of specific fears. Plus there are also children coming with panic attacks, especially in the context of the COVID pandemic. We saw a lot of kids coming with these chest pains and other physical complaints because they are worried, so their worries come out as physical complaints. So some of these kids have had a lot of investigations done on them and they have gone to multiple doctors because the parents are extremely worried.
I think that's a very good point to actually emphasize on, because sometimes it's not only your physical diseases that can affect you, right? Sometimes it can be your emotional well-being that can affect your health, overall health as well.
Yeah, because there's this connection between our minds and our bodies.
Yes.
So we see a lot of children coming with fainting episodes, chest pains, headaches, and all sorts of somatic or physical complaints. But when we investigate and there's nothing that we can identify as causing this, then sometimes we do come across the situations where these children have a lot of psychic or mental distress, and that is how they present, because they are not able to, especially the very young kids, are not able to voice their difficulties. So they may not be able to tell us how distressed they are, how scared they are. So they tell us that they have a tummy ache or a headache, and then the parents are also very scared because they want to find out what's going on, and even though investigations may not find anything wrong, the parental anxiety may also be very high, and then they go around doing more investigations and the child becomes even more scared. So it sort of sets up a bit of a vicious cycle sometimes. And then the other group of disorders that we see are mainly the behavioral ones. So we see kids with hyperactivity, and we see kids who have what we call conduct disorder, where kids are very stubborn, oppositional, and they may have, they may behave in a very aggressive,
mischievous manner.
Yeah, mischievous and very aggressive manner. And another thing that's emerging in the younger kids is, of course, these issues with screen time. So that's another problem that's coming up.
I think those were some psychiatric disorders. You can call it exactly a psychiatric disorder, can you, the screen time problem?
Yeah, so it's a bit difficult to draw that line where the normal screen time, then the bit of the problematic screen time, and then you have internet gaming disorder and the disorders related to screen usage. So it's a tricky judgment sometimes.
Yes. And doctor, if I ask you, what can actually affect a young person's or a child's mental health? What can affect?
Yeah, so there are lots of factors. If you could look at the slide, we can see that there is a lot of, there are three main factors. The biological factors, where we see what is coming through their genetics, so it may be familial, or they may have some physical illness that could contribute to their mental health. And then we have what we call psychological factors. So some kids are very by nature they are very anxious. They are easily scared. They may be very sensitive to things. So those kids are more prone to develop certain types of disorders. So psychologically also there may be certain factors that causes mental health disorders. And then of course you have the social factors, where again the environment impacts on a child's mental well-being. I think in the next slide it's given in a bit more detail. So this is a model that we look at when we think about the social input for a child's mental well-being. You can see how in the middle you have the child, and then you have the immediate environment, the family, and then the school, and then surrounding those you have the other environments where the child may not be directly involved in, like say the parent's workplace. That can still impact on the child's mental well-being, because say if the parent has a very bad day at work, and when they come home they are really annoyed with the child, they are not in a good mood, so that can again affect how they interact with the child. And then of course the wider psychosocial factors definitely impact on a child's mental well-being, because kids are very much dependent on the adults, and they are very sensitive to what is going on in their environment.
Doctor, if I ask you the question, are some children or young people more prone to experience specific type of disorders or mental health problems?
Yeah. So there are certain kids who have increased vulnerability to mental health disorders. For example, if we look at, when I mentioned about the biopsychosocial model, so biologically they may be predisposed. There may be a strong family history of depression or anxiety. Then the kids may be more prone to develop these disorders.
It can be hereditary as well.
Yeah. And then psychologically, some kids are very concerned about how they do things. They have what we call perfectionist traits, so they want to do everything perfectly. So that can also create a lot of stress. And then of course the environment. So if there's their socioeconomic status, if there's a lot of conflict in the family environment, domestic violence is one factor, and of course children who have been the victims of abuse and neglect are also more prone to develop this sort of problems.
I think a huge responsibility lies in the hands of parents or the adults in a household to actually manage the household in a proper manner, where the child can be developed in the way that they should be. So doctor, now say for example a parent is at home and they notice some signs of their child being not normal. We could call it, they might sense that something's not is up to any good. So what are those signs that some parents could experience in their children which can indicate that there is a problem?
Yeah, so there are several indicators. One is of course in relation to the developmental disorders. So if most parents are aware that the child should develop certain abilities at certain ages, like when they start to speak, when they start to walk. So if there are delays, we have to be a bit more vigilant, and we have to go and take advice as early as possible if there are any developmental delays. And then emotional issues can present as irritability in young children. So if the child is more irritable than usual, or crying more than usual, or is very clingy and very fearful, very scared. And then there's also something called regressed behaviors, where a child who has who is about 4 or 5 years and who is sort of now doing well in terms of his toilet training and everything, suddenly starts wetting himself. So that's called a regressed behavior. So that can happen when a child is stressed or emotionally distressed. And then there are also like other behaviors like thumb sucking. So they may have given up thumb sucking and suddenly restarts it. So that's again a sign that something is not going well. And if there's a lot of school refusal, and if there's deterioration in how they are doing at school, so that's a very significant sign of some sort of distress. And if there's any behavioral change, if a previously calm child suddenly becomes very angry and is running around, then we have to...
That's definitely a sign.
Yeah.
And doctor, now say for example a parent watching this at home thinks that I'm worried about my child, something's not normal at all. So what can they do in the current context of the country as well? What options are there?
Yeah, so there are several options. So in each district we have a consultant psychiatrist, and there is at least one child psychiatric clinic running in each hospital, in at least one hospital in each district. So they can go to the nearest hospital and get some advice, see whether there is something wrong, and if needed they will refer to appropriate specialized services, psychiatry and child psychiatric services. And another thing is of course they can ring the mental health helpline at National Institute of Mental Health on 1926 to get some advice, if because nowadays it's traveling can be a bit of a challenge. So that's another option that they can use.
Reminder of the number again, doctor, if you could remind.
Yeah, it's 1926.
1926 is the number.
Yeah, and you can ring the number and see if you can get some advice on how to proceed, and if there's something actually that you need to be mindful of, because sometimes we may worry but it may not be as bad as we think.
Yeah, that's true.
And I guess another very good source is the school teachers, because they have seen such a lot of kids through their careers and they are able to detect if something is not going right. So I think to have a good relationship with your child's class teacher is something that really matters when it comes to the child's mental health.
Then doctor, say for example a single child gets diagnosed with a certain psychiatric disorder, what kind of treatments are available in the current Sri Lankan medical sector? What kind of treatments are available?
Yeah, so when we do see kids and if we do come to the diagnosis of a major psychiatric disorder, there are several options. Of course, we involve the family in most of these discussions and making decisions about how we want to move forward, because one option is of course psychological and behavioral management strategies. Most parents are willing to try these because they don't want to give medications for their children usually. But for certain very significantly disruptive and distressing disorders, we might resort to medications, but we always use medications in conjunction with other behavioral and psychological strategies. We hardly ever use medications as standalone therapy for the young kids with psychiatric disorders.
And those were some kinds of treatments which are available in the current context as well. Now, Doctor, you did mention to me before the program that you were part of the Sri Lanka College of Child and Adolescent Psychiatrists. So, what are the awareness initiatives which are taken by the said institution? What kind of education, or you educate the public? What kinds of things have been done?
Yeah, so we have had during the COVID period, actually we have had several webinars which is advertised and which is available free of charge for the public. And if you do go to the Facebook page of the Sri Lanka College of Child and Adolescent Psychiatrists, you can access those recordings as well. And then we have also had programs with schools and the Ministry of Education, and also with the Ministry of Health. We have done certain programs to increase public awareness, as well as to train the primary care health workers in detecting child psychiatric issues and referring early.
And Doctor, if you could recommend some organizations which are qualified to give mental health advices to parents and young children, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so the gold standard would be, of course, to go to the nearest government hospital where there will be a psychiatric clinic, because like I said, there's at least one child psychiatric clinic per district. So that's the best way to get advice. And of course, you can contact the National Institute of Mental Health on their hotline, or there are certain other non-governmental organizations as well
in the private sector.
Yeah, that might give advice free of charge and who may direct you to the necessary services.
And Doctor, we have come towards the final part of the program as well. My ultimate question to you would be, what is a message that you have to especially the parents, because we're talking about a targeted group, given the current context of the country as well, the mental health status. So what is your message to especially to the parents out there who are watching today's show?
Yeah, so I think the most important message is that we should always be emotionally available for our children. So just being physically there isn't adequate. We have to always try to talk to them, see what they are doing, engage with them, so that from an early age we have a good relationship with them and we are open to discussions and conversations, and children feel safe enough to come to us if they have any issue.
And Doctor, one thing I might interfere, I think having an open mind when dealing with your child's problems, I think that's a very good way for the child and the parent to communicate better.
Yeah, because we have seen children trying to communicate their distress, but sometimes because the parents don't want to see their kids in distress, they might not pay a lot of attention, or they might say it's nothing and try to brush it off. So we have to always try and listen and give them the priority.
And I think that was a very good message to the parents out there as well who are watching today's show. And with that, we have come towards the end of the program today on iMed. Now, next week, we will be talking about something much more specific. Today, we talked about children and their mental health issues. Next week, we will be focusing on adolescents who are, by the definition of the WHO, we will be focusing on children aged 10 to 19, but there isn't necessarily a specific line, but younger children or teenagers who have more understanding about their mental health status. So with that, we have to end today's session of iMed. Thank you so much, Doctor. We did have with us Dr. Dulangi Dahanayaka, consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist at the Lady Ridgeway Hospital. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining with us.
Thank you.
And with that, we end today's segment of iMed. Thank you so much for joining in. We will meet next week. Up until then, have yourselves a great rest of the day.